Hello everyone. Thank you for joining me for this weekly live streaming about the Uno platform, where I do lots of hacking around what's available in the Uno platform and trying to bug fixes or showing you what's new with the Uno platform. My name is Jérôme Laban. I'm the CTO of the Uno platform, open source project. You can find us at platform.uno or on GitHub for Uno platform. So last week we released the Uno platform 3.9 with quite a few things in there. Not so shiny in a sense of this is a UI framework, but we've added three major things. So the first one is .NET 6 mobile support. When we're talking about .NET 6 mobile, we're talking about iOS, Android, macOS, and Catalyst, which are the successors of the support for Xamarin Android, iOS, macOS. And the new one on the block is the Mac Catalyst support, which is a version of a UI kit running on macOS without changing many things, which is quite different from the macOS support, which runs on AppKit. Uno supports all three, starting from Uno 3.9. The interesting thing about this is that now, if you look into the NuGet package that comes from the Uno UI platform, you'll find that there are now additional target frameworks that are available as part of the build. This was an interesting development, adding that new feature inside of the Uno platform. And one of the things is that being able to build for at the same time for Net Standard and Xamarin iOS, Android, and then .NET 6 iOS, Android, Catalyst, and others, it kind of makes the build a bit complicated. So we ended up doing a multi-pass build that generates binaries and then packs it up at the end in a different build. If you want to take a look at that, it's on our GitHub and the Azure DevOps pipeline. But the interesting part here is that you now see all the targets that the Uno platform supports. So multiple versions of Mono Android, Net 6, then Catalyst, macOS. So that's the new target frameworks that were added. That one is for WebAssembly and Skia. UAP is just as a fallback if you install the Uno UI package on a UAP platform, then that will take over. And then you have Xamarin iOS and Xamarin Mac. So that's the target. So that starts to make a quite large NuGet package for this target, but it's quite interesting. So the second thing that we added is support for Visual Studio 2022, and Visual Studio 2022 is needed for .NET 6 mobile specifically. So most of the things that are worked on by Microsoft need that version, and it also needs a newer version of the Uno platform support, the Uno platform support Visual Studio extension. So, and one of the reasons for that is that Microsoft moved from Visual Studio 32 bits to 64 bits. And the packages that need to be recompiled, the extension need to be recompiled from that target to the new one. So that's why it took us a bit more time to get there. Now we have it, and we can create a multi-platform application here and see what that does. So let's see. So we're going to say Net 6 mobile 01, and that's going to be the first target. So one of the things to know with the .NET 6 support at this point is that we're running on Visual Studio 2022 Preview 2.1, and many of the support for that is actually not complete yet in Visual Studio. So that means that, for instance, we should be able to debug an iOS application running in Visual Studio connecting to a Mac, but that is not yet possible. So I mean, it builds, it starts to run, and then fails with a deployment issue. So with regards to mobile targets, one of the things that you will notice is that we've collapsed all the targets into one project. So that single project here is Net 6 iOS, Android, Catalyst, and macOS. Those were previously 4 targets. So 4 projects visibly here, and that was annoying. I mean, to be honest, it was creating multiple projects and it was confusing for people. Now, the interesting thing is that now with that we have that single project, we can now select the target framework here and select the appropriate target to run. So that's one of the good things that have been worked on by Microsoft. So inside you'll find projects, and the structure may change in the future. I'm not sure exactly if we're going to keep that. We may add, we may align with what Microsoft is doing for Maui, which is having another platform folder inside. We don't know yet, but you basically find everything that you found in previous project, but they're all aligned into one project. So when you're building, you need to actually first, that's the before you build, you have to install something, and you have to install .NET 6 and the right version of .NET 6. So I'm just want to be sure that I'm having the right one. I'm not sure exactly. Let's check. So if I do version, so I'm on preview 6, which is good. But to be sure that you have preview 6 installed, you need to be running the Maui check, the Uno check support, which is inspired by Maui check. And to do that, you just have to execute this line. So you do .NET tool install, and the version is with double dash. I probably should be changing the article here, so it's -- version. So the tool is installed already, and then what you do is just run Uno check like this, and what will happen is that the tooling will then execute and try to provide all the details that are needed for the applications to run properly. So it ran pretty fast because I installed everything, but the idea is that it will validate for .NET, for your Android emulators to make sure that they install properly, that you're using the right version of Visual Studio with the proper workloads installed and options in Visual Studio. So that's the kind of things that you can see there. And then once everything is installed, then in Visual Studio, you can just start your application here. So one of the bugs that is interesting is that you can see here that I selected Android, but you cannot see the emulator. So you have to unload the project, then reload the project, and then you will see at the top once you select the startup project that the emulator will appear soon. So if I start the application, so the installation wasn't completed properly. So maybe I'm not using the right version there. Let me try to validate that. If it's not, we'll need to validate a few additional things. So NuGet.config is right. Let's see. Get the right versions here. So it could be that something was not updated properly. So it says directory name, it cannot be evaluated. Okay, so we can see it's still in preview, so I'm not exactly sure which one that is, but it looks like the workloads were not installed properly somehow. So we may have to uninstall it, but we can try. Let's try. Let's use the new tooling to get things installed. So for some reason it doesn't seem to be working either. Nope, doesn't seem to be working either. But the tooling here on my machine is probably not installed properly. So let me try to run it again. Let's see if it changes something. So it validates everything, tries to validate the installation there. So did it try to? It checked preview 6, which is good. It looks like it didn't install the mobile development, so that one is good as well. So I may have broken something in my installation. So I'm gonna have to update that for a newer version. So if you're trying it out, you may want to ensure. So I tried to build the application, and you can see here that it says that the path is not the right one. So it looks like the SDK manifests are not the right one. So let me try. Maybe if I compile it using the command line, maybe. Let's see with the command line. maybe sometimes it would help better. Let's see. No, it's the same thing. So it looks like probably mixed up the installations for this. Let's see. You could probably try uninstalling it to see if that helps. Let's see. That would be something quite interesting to update. So let's see, .NET. I never remember the name. I don't know if they say .NET or if it's .NET. No, it's not .NET like this, but .NET like this. I have multiple previews installed, so it could be that. Okay, so let's try uninstalling it and see if that helps. So it's installed with Visual Studio, so I cannot uninstall it. So if, oh, that's interesting. So that would be, so I cannot modify that one. I cannot update it using this one. Okay, so we're gonna have to take a look at a few additional things with the installation for .NET 6. So Preview 7 is probably gonna be released this week, but I'm not sure if that's gonna fix that kind of issues. But stay tuned. So that's it for .NET 6, and for the preview for .NET 6 and the preview for Visual Studio 2022. We made a few additional changes for programmatic and keyboard focus, so we can now move with the keyboard and key and tab key between controls. So that's pretty useful when you're in an app that has a lot of fields. We also have a new feature that's called XAML resource trimming that allows to remove some of the content that is not used. So let's say if you have multiple controls in the library and some of the controls are not used, that means that those controls and the styles that are associated to those controls need to be removed when they're not used. At current time, and the previous version of Uno, that code was still being compiled anyways, and it was making the application significantly larger. Now we changed this, and if you enable that feature for trimming, then the application basically, when you're using a WebAssembly AOT, is divided by 2. So that's pretty nice. It's something that that is something that will be also enabled in the future for .NET 6 targets, so iOS, Android, to make applications smaller. So that's going to be interesting. So that's it, and a few other contributions that have been provided by the nice community for Uno platform. Okay, so the second topic I wanted to take a look at is the support for SQLite WebAssembly, and there were quite a few things that were there that were there previously with the use for SQLite, and we have a demo that exists already. I don't know if I added it there. Yes, exactly. So this is a demonstration that we have that allows to use Entity Framework Core and uses a few additional things like a SQLite database integrated into the app, stored inside a browser, so everything's local. But that application is built using the Mono runtime, so not .NET 6 or .NET 5 for that matter. And there are a few things that change in between versions that makes it not work with .NET 5. And we're going to dig into one of the details that make that project not work with .NET 6. I see there was a question. So random questions. If I have website 1 and website 2 and user go to website 1, sign up, create an account, is there a way to automatically create a user account website 2? I mean, it's not something that is specific to Uno. It's something that you would do in your backend. Or I'm not sure exactly what website 1 and 2. Are you both managing? Are you managing both sites, or is it 2 different sites? Then in that case, that would mean that it's something that you would use SSO or any kind of OpenID provider to do that. Not exactly sure what the question is there. Okay, so you manage both sites. Okay, so if you manage both sites, that means that somehow your backend would be the same, and then if you create an account, you would have to manage that from the backend. So I don't know how you're managing that, but it's not something that Uno is going to be providing in any way. So it's something that you will do in your backend when you're creating your site. So I'm assuming that you would have the same backend, or at least same identity backend, so that you can have the same user for both sites. So SQLite is interesting because it's there's the support for SQLite through the compilation for the actual library for SQLite, which is a C library. It is compiled down to a WebAssembly module that is linked at runtime at compile time by the Uno platform, so that it can run in your browser. The problem is that when moving from one target to the other, there's something that the SQLite PCL raw library by AridSync and is working on that library. It needs one feature that is called unmanaged colors only, and the problem is that that specific attribute is something that was only provided starting from .NET 5. So if I take a look at that specific attribute, we can see here that it started from .NET 5. And the SQLite PCL library, if you take a look at that, so let's go back to SQLite PCL raw core, watch at least that one. I'm not sure if it's the exact library. There are multiple ones. It's a net standard 2 library, but there's also ones with PCL core. So there's the raw, there's the ugly, and there's one that's called, if I remember correctly, SQLite 3. There are multiple ones. So it's a pretty complex library that does lots of features, supports many platforms. And in some cases, it becomes complicated to make it work, but there's one specifically that is of interest. I don't think it's that one. So that one targets Linux. It uses the SQLite 3.so or DLL or others that are available depending on the platforms. Let me check again into that project. There's a specific library that you can reference. There's bundle SQLite 3. So there's SQLite provider SQLite 3. So that one is providing the implementation for all this, and that specific library supports pretty much anything. So it supports UAP and standard 2. And if I move up to the pre-release builds, Eric made some modifications to add support for more libraries, if I remember correctly there. So there's net standard 2 here. But there's another one that's needed. But the idea is that that library cannot be used with the current implementation of Mono. So if we go to nuget.org just to download the file so we can see the content. So I can show you what I mean by that. If I open the net standard 2 library, if Visual Studio wants me to open that one, no, it doesn't. Do I have iSpy open there? No, I don't have iSpy. I thought I did. Okay, so maybe I have. Oh, I think I have it somewhere there. No, it's not here. Okay, so let's go find that iSpy, so we can view the content. There's a package. Oh, that's cool. They added a package that's now available. Okay, so I'll go for the binaries for now. So we can just go take a look at that specific assembly. And okay, so we're gonna take a look at that binary. And okay, so I don't have 7-zip installed on that machine, so it probably should be helpful to visualize the content. So if I go to the lib net standard and if I look at that library, we're going to find the implementation for the SQLite 3 provider. And basically, you're going to find all the methods that are exposed by the C# by this the C library, exposed as C# methods. So let's say you're going to find the SQLite free with interrupt and close and open somewhere in there, execute and others. So all the methods that are there. The thing is that all those targets are using native pointers and native things that are not particularly interesting when dealing with SQLite from C#. So the SQLite PCRR is doing that kind of stuff and is able to take all those methods there and exposes those to C# so that they can use without having to deal with interrupt. The thing is that some of those methods are what are called callbacks. And that one specifically, so you can see here that that one is private. So if I search for uses of that method, I don't know if it's going to provide me that. Yeah. So if I search for the uses of that, you're going to see that the exec here is using a CB variable, which uses that target here. And what happens is that it passes that to the SQLite 3 exec method, and it becomes available, and it's actually called back by the SQLite native runtime. And the problem is that when you're using WebAssembly, that method needs to be handled in a specific way. It cannot be just it has to be handled in a specific way, and some code needs to be generated. So what I'm going to show you is what we're doing inside of .NET, inside of the Uno Bootstrapper to handle those cases. So callbacks are pretty specific in terms of how WebAssembly is able to execute code. And when you're in .NET, this is kind of something that it doesn't exist for the runtime. For the native methods. So it's something that .NET invents on the fly, if you will, and it cannot execute this as part of a callback from C code back to .NET. So it needs to manipulate the callback so that it can be executed properly. So what we're going to do is try to do something around this. This is an attribute that we need to determine the presence for, and have something that executes right away. So if I go back to the SQLite PCRR and try to execute the application, we're going to find a few details there. So let's see if I build that application. We're going to check what happens there. So we're on an older version of the Bootstrapper, probably going to be updating to see if something behaves better. So executing .NET there. So that one, I don't know what that one is, if it's the linker or not. Yes, it's the linker running. Okay, so there's a need for an update there. So let me terminate that one. So the Microsoft team has been working on improving the linker, and now that we do the updates for the Bootstrapper, we get some interesting performance improvements. So let's update the Bootstrapper to the latest version, so we don't wait too much on the stream for code to compile. So it's Bootstrapper 127. And if we build that again, let's see how far we do go. It should be a bit faster now. Still Python executing. So it's installing, it's installing a newer version of Emscripten. So that's why it takes a bit more time this time. Okay, so when we're going to be running the application, what's going to happen is the runtime is not going to be able to find, it's not going to be able to find some updates. Okay, so I probably changed a few things there. Yeah, I did an override of the runtime, so let's remove this. So we use the right version of the runtime. And so when we try to run the application, it will start properly and then fail at some point, because when we're trying to execute some methods, then the callbacks are not going to be found. So that's what we're going to try to work around and get the execution working properly. So what we need to get is the runtime to recognize those pinvoke callbacks so that some code is generated properly by the WebAssembly tooling, so that we can get our SQLite running completely. So that's the base idea, what we're trying to modify there. So still Python there. Okay, so then it's executing. So Python is executing the MCC compiler, so that's the linker there. I don't know if we can see it here. I don't think so. No, we need to see it from there. So we get Clang running. And the build failed again. Okay, so this time that means that there's something else that we need to troubleshoot. So let's troubleshoot this. We're going to restart the build again, and we're going to look at the build log to see what failed. So let's let it run. So now if we go back to the Bootstrapper, I'm going to show you what I mean by the piece of code that is there to read the content of the assemblies and try to generate some callbacks from the native side back to the C# side, .NET side. So there's a tool that is called the WASM Tuner. And there's something that's called a pinvoke table generator. And that code is there to determine that if the attribute is called a manage callers only or manage mono pinvoke callback attribute, then it's supposed to be a callback, and then some code needs to be generated. Now, it looks like for some reason when we're running the WebAssembly, running the compilation here, it fails for some other reasons. We're going to try to determine why the code is not generated the right way. Okay, so we can see here that there's a native error, and we can see that the SQLite library that is used is a version that has its maximum version of Emscripten build to 2.09, and we're using 2.0.23. So that makes some weird error messages like this one. So the best way for working around this is to update the NuGet package for the SQLite support that we have down there. And I made an update a few days ago to add support for the latest version, or one of the latest versions of Emscripten, so that we can get our build running properly. So now I should be seeing this. So I don't know if so we're in debug. Let's go to the work AOT folder. So the work AOT folder is what the .NET WebAssembly tooling, so the UNO Bootstrapper tooling uses to generate the final package. And we'll find quite a few things there. some C files that are used to link everything up. But also we're going to find the pinvoke.h and pinvoke.c, but a few additional files which are going to be generated pretty soon, like the pinvoke table here, which is generated by finding everything that we can find there in the assemblies that are linked as part of the whole package. Now, one that we need to find is callbacks that are supposed to be generated, and it looks like, from the looks of the list here, the callbacks are not available. So if we look here with the collect pinvoke and the generation that we're doing instead of .NET, we have the pinvokes, and we have the emit pinvoke table. That's the pinvoke. There's also one for the native to interp, which is the way back. And we're talking about something that's called wasm native to interp function descriptor. And that is supposed to be filled with something that is allowing for calling back from SQLite to the runtime. And the problem is that the function that we're looking for, which is this one, exec hook bridge impl, is not available in that list. So that means that when we're invoking SQLite exec, which needs to call back to this method, it fails to do so because the method is not available, because the runtime, the .NET runtime doesn't know about it. So that's what we're going to try to change. So the build failed again. Let's see what the error is this time. So this time it said 209 again. So that means that the update didn't work properly. Okay, so let's see if we didn't have another version of that package that we added there. Ah, there it is. It's not updated. It's not updated in the same way. Okay, so I think it was 33412. Okay, so now if we rebuild again, we have something working better. I would hope so. So error. Okay, so that's something else. That's actually, so that issue that you just saw, it was a bit too fast, but it was there. It's something that the Roslyn compiler is having, because the design time builds are running at the same time as the actual build, and many things are running at the same time, and the design time builds are removing files that the actual build are using. So that's quite annoying, and it's something that we I hope will be fixed until the release builds of .NET 6. But at the rate at which .NET is going, I don't think it will be fixed anytime soon. So we're probably going to have to adjust that inside of Uno. But we'll see. So see, it rebuilt it again, and then it worked. So it's something that happens in the same way with OmniSharp. The output of the design time builds are the same as the one that are used by the normal builds. So it makes for some pretty odd error messages. So it's still using the wrong version for some reason. So maybe there's something that we're not seeing there. So it's supposed to be 33412, but it looks like I'm not having the right one. So it could be that the package was not published. So that would be something that was there. So let me take a look at one of the publications that we have. And if that happened, we're going to be downloading that file directly to the machine so that we don't have to wait for that to happen, for the publication to happen. So if we go to that here, there was an update. If we search for SQLite, so that would be this one. There was a version bump here. And it's supposed to be having 223, but for some reason it's not there. So we're going to download it and use it locally for now. I'm just going to open that file to ensure that we're having the right thing there. 223 is here, so that should be the right one. So that's interesting. So that's probably something that we're missing there. Maybe there's a bug in the tooling there, because it's supposed to be using the right file. So let's look. So we have 33412, and it's still using the 209 version of the package there. So let's see. If we go to that version, we have the 23, but it's not taken into account. So why would that be? It could be because of a version of the Bootstrapper, but the Bootstrapper is using that version of the runtime. So it could be something else. Okay, so we're going to hack it through for now. Something that's not particularly interesting this time. So we're going to take the 223 and put it in 209. For some reason that one is used, but it's probably something else that's not working there. So I'm just going to override the versions for now. And we're going to try again because that's not what we're looking for at this point. Okay, so looks like it's building a bit better. Still building on .NET this time. That's the linker running. And then it should be Python running afterwards. Okay, it ran. Okay, so let's start the app and see what happens. So at runtime, so that's the current issue. So the app starts properly, but then when you click execute, so the browser is running properly, but then the application stops because there should not be reached, and it fails because it failed to find quite a few things internally. So you don't see many of those issues, and we need to be able to ensure that we have the right binary so that the linker, so that the runtime generates the right callbacks. So let's go back again in there and try to see why the pinvoke table is not having the right values. So if we look here, we can see here that the content is not right. So the generation of that table is done through the use of Cecil, and this is something that is reading. This is a tooling that is reading the assemblies that are in the linker out folder, or linker. I'm not entirely sure, but let's take a look at the linker in. So we need to find the same thing that we had there with the pinvoke callback here, and maybe it's not available somehow. So let's try to dig that one up. So we have SQLite PCL route provider SQLite 3. And if we open that file, let's see if it's exactly the same one that we had here. So do we find the callbacks that we're needing here? So in here we have the mono pinvoke callback. So that's there. So that means that the generation should find those, but it doesn't. So let's try to find out why. So the tooling here is invoked through the wasm tuner. So if we search for tuner here, we got PowerShell here. Got a gen pinvoke table. So we got .NET wasm tuner here, and it has all the parameters for generating the pinvoke table. So, and it gets all it gets all the parameters like the name of those assemblies, and then in there we should find the SQLite 3 assembly. So we find here SQLite PCL raw provider SQLite 3. So that means that the file is the right one, but we can see here that it uses the linker out one. So let's go find if the linker out one has what it takes. So let's remove this, and we're going to take the linker out folder instead. And same thing with the SQLite provider assembly. So do we have the attribute? And it looks like it's not there. So we're looking for a method that was called a callback. Exec. Supposed to be defining for exec. Okay, so it's actually more complex than that. So the assembly that the method that we're looking for is not there at all. And what that would mean is that the linker is detecting that those methods are not detecting that the methods there are used. So it's removing them. Well, thank you, Das World, if I pronounce it properly. Yeah, it's deep in the weeds, but it's interesting. You know, it's kind of showing what it takes for the runtime to actually run properly. So what that would mean is that that assembly is not is linked too much. So we need to be removing. We need to ask it to keep some methods. So let's try this. Let's see my linker. What do I have? Okay, so I probably had tested already to remove that. So let's do it. So I'm just going to take this one and say that assembly completely needs to be not linked out. So everything that's in there should stay there, so that the tooling can generate some code properly. So let's rebuild and see if the files are generated properly this time, or if it fails for another reason. Because I know that the linker has been updated quite a bit this time. Okay, same issue as last time. Let's rebuild. Okay, didn't build this time again. That one's annoying. Okay, it built this time. So we're going to try to find inside the work AOT folder. Still going to try to find the pinvoke list and try to find which one needs to be generated there. So that's interesting because the tooling generates some C code for mscripton to detect that methods are actually used, or actually functions. It's not methods in that context. It's functions that they are actually used, and that they can be called back from native code back to .NET. Okay, so it failed for some other reason. So now let's go take a look at the pinvoke table and see if we have our content available. So it's still not there. It's still not there, and it could be that the linker is still removing content. That would be a problem. Okay, so let's refresh this and try to find if we have the binaries that we need. So I'm going to be reopening the file again from the linker out folder. So let's go for linker out and then find the provider file again. So what do we have inside? So we're searching for exec. Okay, so the exec hook bridge is there. But as you can see, their attribute has been removed, which is a problem. So the attribute is not supposed to be removed. And this means that for some reason, the runtime is detecting, the linker is detecting that this attribute is not used somehow and removes it. So that means that that method is not taken into account and is not used. So that's not good either. So let's go further and disable the linker completely and see what kind of problem we have. Actually, the build failed, so it probably failed for some other reason. Let's try to find which one. Okay, so that's that's another one. So one of the reason this fails is that the C language does not support function override. So you can see here that we have 3 declarations of the SQLite config method. And actually, we can go find those there. Let's find the playbook one. I think that would be enough. And if we search for config, we can find that the method is there 3 times, and C doesn't understand 3 times the same methods with different parameters. So it basically bails out. And the reason that happens is that this method is how do I say this? This method is in C# marked multiple times with DLL import, so that 3 times it tries to generate those methods. And in fact, the one we're actually targeting is just that one, because there's no version of that one that has a 1 or 2 parameters actually. So we should be using only that one, but the tooling that generates that file is not smart enough to detect that, so it generates 3 methods incorrectly. So what we could do is change the linker file and try to say that it should not. So the reason we built before is that because that SQLite config is not, SQLite config method is not used, then it's removed, so nothing's generated from it, so that it doesn't fail. So what we can do here is do something else like this. We're going to use the partial filtering and use methods instead. So the type that we're talking about here is the SQLite provider PCL. So it's that one full name. So we're using this, and then we're going to target that specific method and see if we can make it keep the content properly. So the method that we want to keep is that one. I don't know if it's going to work, but let's see if it helps. So let's build again. Okay, so still doing its work, and we're going to try to find if the file that's generated here is going to contain what we want. If not, then we're going to have to adjust how the linker is behaving. Because at this point, it means that the linker is removing too much, even if we're doing this with the assembly here. So that would be a problem. Okay, so the pinvoke table is here. Do we have our method here? Nope, still not. So that means that that method is not tagged properly. Okay, so what we could do is try to change the linker so that it doesn't remove specific attributes that it's supposed that are not used. And that is something that we can find by piggybacking into the linker to see what it's actually doing. So if we open the logs and try to search for ilink, we're gonna find something there. Okay, so the invoked command is not there, so we're gonna add that one. So there's a special parameter for that you can find in the Bootstrapper. So it's called there's Ninja somewhere. Oh, I need to go to main and pull because it's an older build which doesn't have the parameter that we need. Let's undo that one. We don't need it. So there's an additional parameter. It's called Ninja additional parameter here. So that one. And we're going to add it to our project here. And as always, it's -v to get more information. So let's rebuild this, and we're going to get the actual command line that is used to link all the DLLs from the linker in folder to the linker out folder, so that they only have the content that is actually used. But there's a parameter somewhere that probably is not supposed to be there that removes unused attributes. So that's what we're going to try to adjust. We still have to wait for the build to finish, otherwise we won't get all the parameters, but it's not too long now that the linker has been optimized. Okay, so let's go back again and see what we can find here. So we search for a link. Okay, we have the PowerShell command that is run to execute all this. Interestingly, oh yeah, okay, so that's the first one. So we have a long command afterwards, but that's not particularly useful. So we're gonna navigate to that folder. So we have to go to that folder to execute the command, and then we're going to find which parameter we need to adjust for that file to get there. So if we execute this, so we need to remove the backslash / here. Probably the quotes there. Let's see. There we go. Okay. So the linker is running, the linker step is running manually. And now we're going to try to find what's needed to get there. So it's spewing quite a few error messages. But if we run the same thing without the parameters there, so without the response file, we're going to get what's needed to not remove the content. So if we look at the response file, there's a linker in, there's a response file somewhere in there. Workot linker.response. There it is. So we have the strip link attributes, we have the features, we have disable opts. We also have used attributes only true. So it detects that the attribute is not used and then removes it. So that's not good. And that's a problem for us because we need that attribute to stay there so the tooling can find it. So let's see, maybe there's a parameter that allows us to keep specific parameters. So we have skip and resolve, output, advanced. There's a custom step, skip and resolved. Skip and resolve, used attribute only, link attributes. Keep metadata. So maybe maybe if we force the linker to keep the attribute, maybe it will not remove it from the others. So let's see. So what's happening in there is that we have a reference to something else there. Let's see. So where is that attribute defined? So it's removed from that one, obviously. So let's find it from the original one. So in the linker in folder. So let's try to find the original definition for that one. So let's find that method, mono-p invoke callback, and it is defined in, oh, that's interesting. So it is defined in SQLite PCL raw core. And it could be that that attribute is not detected as being used, so it fails to do something interesting. So let's give that to the linker file and see if that changes anything. So it is full type here. We can ask the linker to avoid linking it out, and we're going to use the actual name of the file, SQLite raw core. And then let's rebuild. Let's see if that's better. So we could see that the linker is removing the file, is removing that attribute that's defined in another assembly. That's defined in SQLite PCL raw core. And it's removing it because we're using the keep, the used attribute only feature, which is quite interesting. So if you're using the attribute, then don't remove it. But now because the attribute is removed, then it's removed from the function that we want to keep. So then the build doesn't succeed. Okay, so it failed because oh, I'm in the folder there, so it will fail. Fails again. Okay, same error as before. Okay, so we can see now in the work AOT if the file is generated with our handler. Let's hope so. So it's still running the linker. Now the linker is done. It's going to generate the file. And in that file, what do we find? Ah, that's much better. So now we can see that we have the wasm native to interp map. And that is filled with symbols that are known. So the commit hook bridge, the scalar, the log hook, and a few other things that are actually pretty useful because the attribute is removed, then the methods is not generated. So I don't know if we have, yeah, we do have the method available there. It's probably defined somewhere up top. There it is. So it's interesting because the runtime needs those bridge methods so that the interpreter is able to call those methods to the native code. So what it does is that it takes the parameters using their closest type matching, and then it does that kind of parameter passing so that the runtimes behaves properly. So this is invoked by native code, and then this is going into the runtime, into the interpreter, so that the method, the .NET method can be invoked from the native code. So it's kind of a proxy from the native to the interpreter. So did the build finish? The build finished. So let's see, does it work? It may not, it still may not work, so we'll see. And it worked. Amazing. And it worked. So that means that we don't need to modify anything. So what we can see here is that the application is running .NET 5. It's running .NET 5 using SQLite and the latest builds of SQLite PCL raw, with callbacks running from the native assembly native SQLite library going back to .NET. And this is, I believe it's EF Core 6 running there, and it executed everything up. So that's pretty amazing. Wow. Okay. I didn't expect that to work pretty quickly, this quickly. So yeah, this is fixed. So let's see if we try to tidy this up, tidy this one up. Can I get this? We need a few things, but basically we need to ensure that this attribute is not being linked out. So that is something that we could ask. Something that we could ask the Eric Sync to add to his library somehow, so that this is not removed. Copycats, and yeah, it doesn't work. Yeah, well, that's the question. You have to ask the question, but now it works, and everything's fixed up, so that's pretty cool. It works. Why? Yeah, that's another one. It works. Why? Because sometimes it's not supposed to work, but it does. So yeah, I say that often. Especially when you're trying to figure out how everything works, and you're thinking that something is not supposed to work, but it does. But yeah, I was expecting something to break in another way, especially because that if you take a look at the previous execution, it actually broke in a pretty bad way. Well, now that one's been reloaded, so it works now, but it was working. It was failing in a pretty bad way. So now it's working properly. So that's good. So what we need to do now is to do two things. We need to make sure that this package somehow provides a way for the developer to get the library running properly. And to do this, we need to ensure that this is available somehow. The thing is that we don't have anything that we need to run. So it may be just something that we can add somewhere in the documentation. So that could be one. It's something that the .NET team is going to have to manage anyways. So we could add a something here, because that assembly is actually not an assembly. It's an empty project that is there only to provide those two references. But maybe we could add a linker file there and say that we force it to keep the reference so that we don't have to add it at the top. So let's try it. Okay, so for now, I'm going to be changing that afterwards. Okay, so that is something that doesn't create a library, because we have generate package on build, and there's probably something else there. Well, it actually generates a package. It generates a package and generates it generates a DLL, so we can probably find that one up. Let's see. If we search for, I think it's called uno.sqlite.provider.webassembly or wasm maybe. Oop, not that one. Ah, there it is. It's called wasm. Okay, so let's see. What do we have in there? Yeah, there's a library. Okay, so it's an empty library, but it still is a library. Okay, so we could probably change that up to have the right content. I can see that, oh, those messages are not supposed to be there either. So those content files are not supposed to be there. So that means that the dependency that we have here is not is not done properly, so we're going to change that. But the linker file that we need is, we need to add a linker file that adds that one, so that developers don't need to think about that one, to think about adding that. So I can show you one of the locations where we're actually using this in Uno. The file has to be an embedded resource that's named after the assembly name. So to find this, we can go into Uno and find, let's say, Uno UINet 6, for instance. I think we have it. We have one here. No, it's not that one. It should be the wasm one then. There it is. Okay, so we have an item group here, an embedded resource with a logical name. So we're not going to be using that name. We're going to be using this one, which matches the logical name of the assembly. So if we go back to our library here, we're going to create a new file that's going to be called linker config, no, linker definition on XML, and then I'm going to add the item group here. We're going to call it that way. Let's reuse the same name. It looked nice. And the assembly name is the right one. Then we can take the linker file here and just take the content that we need. So we're going to be removing everything except that one. So that means that if we remove in the linker file, the original linker file, we remove the SQLite 3 things that we added. Let's comment them out for now. This means that that assembly is gonna get compiled with a file, new file. So let's validate that the content is right there. So if we remove this and go to the debug folder and look at the resources, there's a resource file that's containing exactly what we need, which is named exactly as the file name. So that's the interesting part. So that's what the linker files. It tries to find XML files named after the assembly name and then tries to load them up. So that's the way the linker works. So now that we have removed the provider from there, we should be able to run the application again, but this time it should be working without having to add the assembly exclusion here. So that would be the right way to do this. So the objective here is to be able for developers to reference that package, that NuGet package from their application, and then reference Entity Framework and a few other libraries like this, and then get that to work without having to touch anything. So that would be the ultimate goal. And the side goal is for having Eric not do anything for that to work properly. So that is another interesting part. So if we run this, does it work? No, it doesn't work. Okay, so that means that the exclusion that we did is not working properly. So let's try to find it. Let's try to find out why. So we can take a look at the output folder here. So the linker in folder to understand if the file that we're getting is the right one. So we should be getting something that is called uno.nothing, interestingly. So it's supposed to be called Uno SQLite Provider PCL Row, and it's not available there at all. So that would mean it's removed completely because it's not referenced. And that is a problem. That is a problem. Okay. So we have we have a project reference here, but the file is removed because it's not used. Okay, let's try to determine if we actually do make a reference to it. So let's put a dummy type there. Yeah, let's add a C# file, and then we're going to reference that. We're just going to do type of class 1 at the top and see if that helps. So let's do this. Is it really class 1? Where does that one go? Yeah, that's the right one. Okay, so let's rebuild again. So the reason the assembly is empty. So because it's empty, the compiler is not referencing it in any way. So that means that the assembly that project is generating is not referenced at all, which means that the linker file is not provided. Then our attribute is getting removed because the linker file that we defined here is not taken into account. Now, what may happen though, and you probably would see this because of the number of files that are in the output folder, is that if the DLL is coming from a NuGet package, but not an actual C# project, then the file is likely to be kept. So we may not need to have the type of at the top to make everything work. Okay, so it worked, and you could see that the storage worked properly because it's the second execution for that one, and the content was kept alive. So that's pretty nice. So it actually was persisted across executions. So that's it. I think we have something that works pretty well. So that means we're going to be able to have a new version of the SQLite PCL RAW provider for Uno that works on WebAssembly and .NET 6, which is the important one. So that's pretty cool. And the best of all is that we don't have to change anything for getting it to work. So no change in the original libraries for SQLite PCL RAW, neither in the .NET runtime or anything else. So that's pretty cool. And the linker works properly. So yeah, that was an interesting session. I hope you enjoyed going deep into the linker stuff and WebAssembly stuff and runtime stuff with a bit of C code. So that was nice. So you'll be seeing a pull request sometime in the next few days that fixes this, and you'll be able to run your applications using SQLite and .NET 5 or 6. So I wish you a good week, and if you want to get notified when I come online on Twitch, give me a follow on Twitch or on YouTube. I think you can do the same as well there. And till then, happy coding. See you next week. Bye for now.